December 14, 1911, the Supreme Court orders the dissolution of Standard Oil. Newspapers across America declared victory. The monopoly was dead, the tyrant was defeated, the system was broken, except none of that was true. Because exactly 1 year later, the man they tried to destroy was 3 times richer than he'd been before the breakup. His wealth didn't evaporate when they shattered his empire into 34 pieces. It multiplied. And if you think that sounds insane, that's because you don't understand the system yet. The system isn't Standard Oil. The system is the method. Rockefeller perfected between 1870 and 1911. It didn't die in that courtroom. It metastasized. It spread into every corner of the economy, into oil, into banking, into pharmaceuticals, into technology. Right now, in 2025, you are living inside a machine designed by a man who died in 1937. Every gallon of gas you pump, every package that arrives at your door, every prescription you fill, every search you type into Google, every dollar you deposit in a bank, all of it flows through structures that Rockefeller invented. And here's the part that should terrify you. You cannot opt out. You cannot boycott your way to freedom. You cannot vote your way out, because the system isn't a company. It's not even an industry. It's the architecture itself, and once you see how deep it goes, you'll realize something Rockefeller understood in 1870 that most people still don't understand today. Monopoly isn't the exception, it's the destination. Let me show you exactly how one man built the inescapable system, how it made him the richest human in history, and why every single choice you think you're making is actually an illusion. Designed 150 years ago, Richford, New York, 1839. John Davison Rockefeller is born to a con man, father selling fake cancer cures, and a devout Baptist mother who believes suffering purifies the soul. This combination, the grifter's ruthlessness married to the preacher's moral certainty, it's not a contradiction, it's the formula. Because Rockefeller didn't just want to get rich, he wanted to believe that getting rich was God's plan. That crushing competitors wasn't cruelty, it was divine organization. That monopoly wasn't theft, it was righteousness. He would carry this conviction for the rest of his life, and it would make him more dangerous than any robber baron who came before or after. 1859, oil is discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and the rush begins. Thousands of drillers flood into western Pennsylvania, fortunes made and lost in weeks, prices swinging from $5 a barrel to 50 cents. It's chaos, pure, inefficient, wasteful chaos. And 20-year-old Rockefeller, working as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, he looks at this frenzy and sees something no one else sees. He sees that the money isn't in drilling. Drilling is gambling. The money is in refining, in turning that crude oil into kerosene that lights America's lamps. In 1863, Rockefeller invests $4,000 into his first refinery in Cleveland. 2 years later, it's the largest in the city. But Cleveland has 30 refineries, and competition is a bloodbath. Margins are razor-thin. Most are operating on the edge of bankruptcy. And this is where Rockefeller's genius ignites. He doesn't try to win the competition. He tries to end it. Here's the move that changes everything: vertical integration. Most refineries just refine. They buy crude from drillers, turn it into kerosene, sell it to distributors. They control one step. Rockefeller decides to control every step. He buys the cooperages that make the barrels, so he's not paying 25 cents per barrel to someone else when he can make them himself for 15. He buys tank cars, he buys warehouses, he buys the distribution networks so he can sell directly to retailers and consumers. Every margin that used to belong to someone else, Rockefeller pulls inside his operation. And now his cost structure is untouchable. While competitors are hemorrhaging money on logistics, Rockefeller's entire supply chain is feeding profit back into his pocket. But he doesn't stop there. He goes to the railroads, the Lake Shore Railroad, and he makes them an offer. I will ship 60 carloads of oil per day on your trains, guaranteed volume, no gaps, no uncertainty. In exchange, you give me a 71% discount, 1 cent per gallon instead of the standard rate. And the railroads, desperate for reliable contracts, they say yes. Now Rockefeller is shipping oil at a cost no competitor can match, and they don't even know why they're losing. By 1870, he formalizes this into the Standard Oil Company of Ohio, but he only controls 4% of American refining. That's not a monopoly, that's just a foothold, so Rockefeller launches Phase 2, and this is where it gets brutal. Horizontal integration. If vertical integration is controlling the supply chain, horizontal integration is eliminating everyone who competes with you. February 1872, Rockefeller begins what historians will later call the Cleveland Massacre. Over the course of 3 months, he approaches every refinery owner in Cleveland, one by one. The pitch is simple: sell to me now at a fair price, or I will destroy you and buy your refinery for pennies when you're bankrupt. Some take the offer, some refuse, thinking Rockefeller is bluffing. He isn't. The moment they refuse, Rockefeller drops the price of kerosene below cost. He can afford to lose money because his vertical integration gives him margins no one else has. His competitors already operating on thin margins, they're bleeding out within weeks. They sell or they collapse. By the end of 1872, Rockefeller controls 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. He's gone from 4% of American refining to 25% in 90 days. And he's just getting started. Through the 1870s, he replicates this in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Same playbook everywhere. Secret railroad rebates, vertical cost advantages, price wars that competitors cannot survive. By 1879, Standard Oil controls 90% of America's oil refining. 90%. That's not a company. That's a chokehold on the entire industry. But Rockefeller understands something most monopolists miss. Monopolies have two fatal vulnerabilities. First, they're illegal, or they will be soon. Congress is already talking about antitrust legislation. Second, they're hated. The public despises him. Newspapers call him a tyrant, a robber baron, the most dangerous man in America. Rockefeller needs a way to protect his monopoly from both the law and public rage. And in 1882, his lawyers invent the solution. The trust, here's how it works. Standard Oil of Ohio, as a state-chartered corporation, cannot legally own companies in other states, but a trust can. So Rockefeller creates the Standard Oil Trust, a separate legal entity that holds the stock of all 41 Standard Oil companies. 9 trustees, all Rockefeller's inner circle, control the trust. The trust controls the companies. Rockefeller controls the trustees. It's a shell game, a legal structure that gives him a nationwide monopoly while technically complying with state incorporation laws, and it's brilliant. This is the first major corporate trust in American history, and it becomes the template. Sugar trust, tobacco trust, steel trust, every industry copies the model. But more than that, it evolves into the modern holding company. Alphabet owns Google, Meta owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Amazon owns Whole Foods, Zappos, Ring, AWS. Every one of these structures is a descendant of Rockefeller's 1882 trust. He didn't just build a monopoly, he built the legal architecture that every monopoly since has used to shield itself from breakup. By 1904, Standard Oil controls 91% of oil refining in America and 85% of final sales. Rockefeller's net worth is $900 million, $25 billion in today's money. But at his absolute peak in 1913, adjusted for inflation, he's worth $400 billion. Richer than Bezos, richer than Musk, richer than Gates, the wealthiest individual human being in modern history. And he built it all on one principle: competition is waste, consolidation is efficiency, monopoly is the natural end state of capitalism. But the public is turning. In 1890, Congress passes the Sherman Antitrust Act, making monopolies explicitly illegal. In 1904, journalist Ida Tarbell publishes her exposé, The History of the Standard Oil Company. Laying out every secret rebate, every predatory price war, every crushed competitor, the outcry is deafening. And in 1911, the Supreme Court rules that Standard Oil is an illegal monopoly and orders it dissolved into 34 separate companies. Standard Oil of New Jersey becomes Exxon, Standard Oil of New York becomes Mobil, Standard Oil of California becomes Chevron. The empire is shattered, Rockefeller has lost. Except he hasn't, because Rockefeller still owns shares in all 34 companies. And here's what happens next, the thing that nobody saw coming. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock is trading at around $600 per share. After the breakup, the combined value of all 34 successor companies is over $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's wealth triples. How? Because the breakup forced the companies to compete, which drove innovation and efficiency. Because investors, no longer afraid of antitrust seizure, poured money into the newly independent firms. And because breaking one monopoly into 34 regional monopolies isn't actually breaking up the monopoly, it's just rebranding it. Today, most of those 34 companies have merged back together. Exxon and Mobil merged in 1999. Chevron bought Gulf Oil and others. BP bought Amoca and Standard Oil of Ohio. The Standard Oil monopoly that was supposedly destroyed in 1911 has quietly reconsolidated over the past century into ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP. The breakup was theater, the system rebuilt itself. And that's the golden thread I need you to hold on to, because this is where it gets terrifying. Standard Oil isn't Rockefeller's legacy, the method is. Let me show you how it's operating right now, in 2025, in every industry you interact with. Amazon started as an online bookstore. Today it owns the entire supply chain. It owns the warehouses where products are stored. It owns the logistics network that moves them. It owns the delivery trucks that bring them to your door. It owns the payment processing. It owns the cloud infrastructure, AWS, that generates $90 billion a year in revenue, more than Amazon's retail arm. Rockefeller controlled refineries, railroads, and distribution. Amazon controls retail, logistics, and cloud computing. Same playbook, different century. But it doesn't stop at vertical integration. Amazon also uses horizontal consolidation. Over 100 acquisitions: Whole Foods, Zappos, Ring, Twitch, MGM Studios. And when it can't buy a competitor, it does something even more ruthless. It uses the data from third-party sellers on its platform to identify successful products, then creates Amazon Basics versions and promotes them above the original. This is Rockefeller's price war updated for the digital age. Legal, barely regulated, and devastatingly effective. Now look at Google. Alphabet is a holding company, just like Rockefeller's trust. It owns Google, YouTube, Waymo, DeepMind, Verily, and dozens of other subsidiaries. One parent company controlling multiple operating entities. This structure shields the parent from liability, enables tax optimization across jurisdictions, and makes regulatory breakup nearly impossible because each subsidiary is technically independent. It's the Standard Oil Trust with better lawyers. Pharmaceutical companies use Rockefeller's regulatory capture playbook. Rockefeller didn't just compete in markets, he shaped the rules. He lobbied for railroad regulations that favored Standard Oil. He worked with politicians to set kerosene quality standards that his refineries could meet, but competitors couldn't. Today, pharmaceutical companies fund the FDA through user fees. They lobby for patent extensions. They write the very regulations they're supposedly regulated by. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, they didn't invent this. Rockefeller did. Control the regulators, and you control the market. The financial sector uses holding company structures. JP Morgan Chase is a holding company that owns Chase Bank, JP Morgan Investment Bank, and countless subsidiaries. Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all structured the same way. When Dodd-Frank tried to regulate banks after 2008, the holding company structure made it almost impossible to enforce. Which entity do you regulate, the parent or the subsidiaries? Rockefeller solved this problem in 1882. Banks just copied the answer. And then there's philanthropy, Rockefeller's most elegant innovation. In 1913, he creates the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial gift of $250 million, over $7 billion in today's money. On the surface, it's charity, Rockefeller giving back, but look closer. The foundation allows him to avoid estate taxes. It gives him control over which universities get funded, which means control over what gets taught and researched. It buys him legitimacy. The most hated man in America becomes a beloved philanthropist. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the creation of modern medical education. It funded Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, Rockefeller University. It established the model for medical schools that emphasized pharmaceutical interventions over holistic care. This isn't conspiracy, this is documented history. The foundation shaped American medicine to favor the pharmaceutical model, and pharmaceutical companies, many descended from Standard Oil's chemical divisions, profited enormously. Today, every billionaire uses the same playbook. Bill Gates created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $75 billion in assets. It funds global health initiatives, shapes who policy, influences governments. Mark Zuckerberg created the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Warren Buffett pledged most of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. These aren't just charity, they're tax avoidance, legacy preservation, and policy influence. Rockefeller invented the formula. Modern billionaires perfected it. Now I know what you're thinking. Okay, the system exists, but I can just avoid it, right? I can buy from small businesses. I can use alternative platforms. I can opt out. No, you can't. And here's why: you need gasoline. You have a choice: Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell. All of them are descendants of Standard Oil or use its exact methods. You're not choosing, you're selecting which branch of the same tree to buy from. You need to shop online. Amazon dominates e-commerce with 38% market share. Walmart and Target survive only by copying Amazon's model. Same system, different logo. You need internet search. Google has 92% global market share. That's higher than Standard Oil's peak of 91%. But Google isn't considered a monopoly because the product is free. You pay with data instead of dollars. Rockefeller would have loved this innovation, a monopoly so complete that users don't even realize they're the product. You need social media. Facebook has 3 billion users. Instagram, also Meta. WhatsApp, also Meta. You're not choosing platforms, you're choosing which Meta property to use. That's horizontal consolidation, Rockefeller style. You need healthcare. You see a doctor trained in a system shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. You take pharmaceuticals developed by companies using patents and regulations pioneered by Standard Oil's chemical divisions. You pay insurance companies using Rockefeller's corporate structures. Every step, extraction. Every choice, an illusion. The average American spends $4,000 per year on gasoline, $3,000 on Amazon, $5,000 on healthcare beyond insurance, $4,200 on internet and technology services. That's over $13,000 a year flowing to companies using Rockefeller's playbook. Over a lifetime, that's $660,000 transferred from your pocket to monopolistic corporations using tactics invented 150 years ago. And you cannot escape it. You could refuse to buy gasoline, but you need transportation to work. You could refuse Amazon, but convenience and competitive pricing make alternatives nearly impossible. You could refuse Google, but what's the alternative with even 10% of its functionality? You could refuse Facebook, but social connection is now controlled by Meta's platforms. You could refuse pharmaceutical medicine, but medical licensing, insurance coverage, and cultural norms are all shaped by the Rockefeller system. This is Rockefeller's ultimate achievement. Not becoming the richest man in history, building a system where escape is impossible. Where every path leads back to consolidated corporate control, where competition is crushed before it can threaten the incumbents. Where regulators protect monopolies instead of consumers, where philanthropy buys influence that perpetuates the whole structure. But here's the thing most people miss, the thing Rockefeller understood that his critics never did: the system isn't evil, it's efficient. Vertical integration actually does reduce costs. Horizontal consolidation does eliminate wasteful duplication. Rockefeller made kerosene affordable for average Americans. Before Standard Oil, kerosene cost 58 cents per gallon. After Standard Oil's efficiencies, 8 cents per gallon, that's an 86% price reduction. That's not exploitation, that's efficiency. Amazon delivers products in 2 days. Google answers every question instantly. ExxonMobil produces gasoline at scale. Pfizer develops life-saving drugs. The system delivers value. The problem isn't that it doesn't work. The problem is who it works for. You get cheap gasoline, fast shipping, instant information, life-saving medicine. Rockefeller's heirs, both literal and corporate, accumulate trillions. Both things are true. The system works and the system extracts. So what do you do? How do you respond to a system you cannot escape? 3 options. 1. Accept it. Understand that consolidation is a feature of mature capitalism, not a bug. Use the efficiencies. Buy from Amazon. Use Google. Accept that wealth concentrates at the top. 2. Resist it. Support antitrust enforcement. Buy from small businesses even when it's more expensive. Use inferior alternatives on principle. Vote for politicians who promise to break up monopolies, knowing they probably won't. Make the system less efficient in exchange for less consolidation. 3. Understand it and position accordingly. If you cannot escape the system, benefit from it. Own the companies that dominate. ExxonMobil, Chevron, Amazon, Google, Fuzza, Japamugin. If the system extracts wealth from everyone and concentrates it in these entities, own these entities. This isn't investment advice. This is pattern recognition. Rockefeller owned Standard Oil while everyone else bought its products. He extracted wealth from the system he built. You can do the same, not at his scale, but proportionally. Own the extractors instead of being extracted from, because here's the reality. The Rockefeller system has been concentrating wealth for 150 years. It's embedded in corporate law, tax code, regulatory frameworks. It will continue because it's structural, not personal. Fighting it is noble but exhausting. Escaping it is impossible. Understanding it is survival. Rockefeller died in 1937 at the age of 97. He lived long enough to see Standard Oil broken up in 1911. He lived long enough to see it quietly reconsolidate. He lived long enough to see his methods spread into steel, railroads, banking, pharmaceuticals, every corner of the economy. He lived long enough to see his foundation reshape American medicine and education. He lived long enough to see his grandchildren positioned at the pinnacles of finance and industry. He built a system that outlived him by a century and will outlive all of us. The system is vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, corporate trusts, regulatory capture, philanthropic influence. It started with Standard Oil. It spread to every industry, and now it is the economy. You cannot buy oil outside the descendants of Standard Oil. You cannot avoid Amazon's logistics network. You cannot opt out of pharmaceutical medicine shaped by Rockefeller's foundation grants. You cannot escape the banking system built on his holding company model. You live inside the system. And the system extracts from you every single day, concentrating wealth at the top exactly as Rockefeller designed it to in 1870. Competition is a sin. Most people hear greed, but Rockefeller meant it theologically. Competition is wasteful. It duplicates effort, destroys capital. Consolidation is righteous. It creates efficiency, serves consumers through lower prices. Monopoly isn't theft. It's the natural end state of efficient markets. This was his worldview, and he built a system to enforce it. 150 years later, we live in that system. Amazon eliminates retail competition. Google eliminates search competition. Meta eliminates social media competition. ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP control oil. Pfizer, Merck, and Johnson & Johnson control pharmaceuticals. Japamugin, Bank of America, and Citi control banking. The consolidation Rockefeller started has reached its logical conclusion. The end state isn't thousands of competitors. It's 3 to 5 dominant players in every industry, all using Rockefeller's playbook. And the consolidation continues. Every year, fewer companies control more market share. Every year, barriers to entry rise higher. Every year, the system tightens. This is the inescapable system, not Standard Oil, the method, and the method is eternal because it works. Remember that mystery from the beginning, December 14, 1911, the day the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil's breakup. The day Rockefeller supposedly lost. That date isn't the end of the story, it's the proof that the story never ends. Because exactly 1 year later, Rockefeller's wealth had tripled. The breakup didn't destroy the system, it validated it. It proved that even when you shatter a monopoly into 34 pieces, if the method survives, the monopoly rebuilds itself. Standard Oil became Exxon, Mobil, Chevron. Those companies are worth over $600 billion combined today. Rockefeller's method became Amazon, Google, Meta. Those companies are worth over $4 trillion. The system didn't die in 1911, it metastasized, it became the economy itself. Rockefeller's machine, every transaction you make, every product you buy, every platform you use. Every dollar you earn, it flows through the architecture one man designed 150 years ago. To ensure that wealth flows in one direction, up. You cannot escape the Rockefeller system, but now you can see it. And seeing it changes everything.